Hey guys, Michael here. Not doing the rant I promised. A couple of people on Facebook promised, threatened, whatever. But something else instead. I got online this morning and one of my very favorite bands posted something that got me listening to some of their stuff. And next thing I knew, I was all on about this. And so I'm going to real quick try to get through this real quick. This is take two. And my director is pretty pissed at me because I utterly drained one set of batteries doing it before, and it was 4 gigabytes and the damn thing shut me off. So let's see how fast I can talk. I can talk really fast. The real question is how much meandering and digressing am I going to do? And what I'm talking about here today is kind of centering around Bill Gaufrier and the two bands that he was involved with, you can almost say is involved with, as well as a few other things that he has done. I'm going to at least give you this much background. The Embarrassment were active from 1979 till about 1983 or early 84. And I was living in Montana during most of that time, and a state in which they never played. They were initially founded, or sort of grew out of, Bill had gone down to Oklahoma to see the Sex Pistols play one snowy night. There were very few people showed up for the show. They met Johnny Rotten, and they went back to Wichita and started a band. I think he'd already been playing in some bands before then with Neighborhood Kids and Good Friends, and but then they were in college, and so that band kind of morphed into ultimately the Embarrassment in a fairly short order. So I get back to the state of Kansas around 1984 and hanging around for a few years. In 1986, a record came out by Big Dipper, the second band, and that I was in love with, and I had met a guy, good friend to this day, named Mike Saunders, and he one day handed me this and said, dude, if you like that, you really need to listen to this. And I did, and I fell absolutely in love. This is almost entirely fan-recorded live music, and there's a lot of that out there. I fell in love with it. It was one of those things it went with me everywhere, partied with me out on the river, and all kinds of things. And eventually then I found a copy of this. This is not the copy I found. The truth is just recently Mike Saunders gave me his copy. He has been such a great and generous friend. This came out in 1984 after they broke up. It is called Retrospective. One side is a studio side, and the other side is live. And it's just a great album. It was recently, actually in 2006, it was transferred to digital and remastered for CD by Jim Rosencutter. And the band had gone on out and had done a reunion show or two. And when they did, then this was being sold at the merch table. Originally on Fresh Sounds, which was a great label out of Lawrence, Kansas in the 80s and 90s. Really great label. I wish I had more Fresh Sounds. I know a couple of people around here do, and I'm jealous. But really great thing. So now I'm going to get back to the Embarrassment's other stuff. I did not know of them at the time that they came out. This was their first single. In 1980, it was put out on Big Time Records, and it's Patio Set with BW Sex Drive. This is not the original. This was a reissue on Last Laugh that was done a couple of years ago, and which is a label that puts out punk classic reissues, and it's great. The original, which I've never seen, goes for big bucks. One way you can tell you got the original, of course, is that it will be on Big Time Records. Another way you can tell is that the center hole is not centered. Not so badly off-centered that you can't play it, but nevertheless off-center. And then this comes with it. They did a very nice job of reissuing it. Blame Records Nito 1. I'm not really sure what all of that is because, as I said, I'm not really that familiar. And then, of course, this is the outer sleeve. This is what I see, and I suspect is the original sleeve cover. Well, in fact, you can kind of tell. It says Big Time Records on there. So, yeah, they pretty much reproduced the thing on a really nice, high-quality card and what have you, and then put it in a generic sleeve inside that with their stamp on it. They're also connected with Big Time, or not Big Time, with a label called Almost Ready, and that kind of comes up here in a minute. Anyway, I do have 2 copies of this. Yeah, you know, I don't know, sort of sitting on them at this point. Then they came out with this, the Embarrassment EP, which came out on Cynical Productions, or Cynical Records. This has on it, on one side, which is called the snappy side, is Celebrity Art Party, Elizabeth Montgomery's Face, and I'm a Don Juan. This is the second press of it. The first press, they misspelled Elizabeth Montgomery's Face. It says Elizabeth Montgomery's Face. I don't remember now if that's on both the sleeve and the label or just the sleeve. But at any rate, when it was repressed, and I do not know that how many were put out on either of those pressings. In 1981, they did correct that, and so I have that. And this is a great little EP. And here again, this is a record that isn't going to come cheap. I bought it for, well, I don't know. I know I paid over, I think, $60 for it. But it's an absolutely perfect copy. I would love to have a first pressing. Unfortunately, as I recall, they, other than mentioning it, they don't have them as separate entries on Discogs, which is where I tend to buy things more often than going elsewhere. And then they put out this on Fresh Sounds. This is the Embarrassment Death Travels West EP, which is an 8-song EP. Has the songs Careen, Viewmaster, Drive Me to the Park, Lewis and Clark, and I said 8, but it's actually a 7-song EP. Why does it say 8 on the? It says 8-song. Apparently it's not. It's a 7-song, unless there's a. Gosh, I haven't played this for a while, but you know what? There is a 4th thing. Death Travels West itself. It's simply not listed on the back. And this was put out on Fresh Sound Records. There are a couple of other things by them on vinyl out there. Most notably, a compilation. I think it's called the Embarrassment LP or something. It's a compilation, and I believe it's on Time to Grow Records. And that's about all I'm going to say about them. This comes with this. Both of my copy of Death Travels West, which I believe Kurt Cobain thought this was great. And this, both of those, the Embarrassment stuff is pretty pricey. Then they broke up, and Woody Geisman, the drummer from the band, who I didn't tell you the lineup, so let me give you that real quick. It was, and I don't even know why I'm bothering to read, but it was Brent Geisman or Woody Geisman on drums, Bill Gaufrier playing guitar, the only guitarist on this, Ronnie Klaus or Ron Klaus playing bass, and John Nichols doing lead singing, playing organ and guitar, and also writing an awful lot of the lyrics. These guys are all still around, still good friends. The band sort of officially broke up in '84, but in another way, they've never really broken up. And they have periodically gotten back together and done some reunion things. I also have this. This is on DVD. This is The Embarrassment Live at the Flatiron. It was filmed, gosh, I don't remember what it was filmed for originally. It was filmed for a television program. I know that. And in Chicago, as I recall. But this DVD came out in 2009, apparently. And it's The Embarrassment playing live at the Flatiron in Wichita, Kansas. Tiny little stage, playing for a bunch of their friends. It's a tiny stage. It's so tiny that they're wedged in to this little corner, and obviously the shape of it, it was like a pie slice, and so you've got Woody at the very back, and then Ron Klaus, and then you've got John and Bill kind of up front, sort of semi next to each other, but not entirely. It's a great CD though, and boy, if you can get your hands on that, that's worth grabbing. Also, in 1988, they put out a new album. They got back together and put out a new album, a studio album, on Bar None Records, called God Help Us. I remember the excitement when we knew that this was going to come out. And then at the time, a little bit of a letdown, anticlimax when we actually got the album. There are two cuts on this album, Train of Thought and After the Disco, that had been included on a sampler by Bar None in different versions. And those sampler versions are really fiery and just almost out of control. And then when you hear them on here, they're a little slower and a little more polished, and it just the early stuff seemed more wild, but in retrospect now, years later, listening to this over and over again, I think it's a great album. I think it's well worth having. I have I got five copies of this from Bill himself. These are sealed, and the one I have open is a cutout. I had 5. 2 of them I have sent to people, and I had another one of these, which I also sent to my friend Dan Gordon in Canada, along with one copy of the album. And also, Bar None then put this out on disc, and it would have been great if they'd put this on vinyl as a double, or it probably would have had to have been a box set. It's called Heyday, and the side 1, or disc 1, is called The Standards, and it includes pretty much the stuff on their albums and what have you, on their records. I don't think they ever put out a full-length album during their lifetime. And side 2 are the Scarcities, which are more taken from other stuff. Also, there is this CD, Blister Pop, which comes from an interview on the radio with The Embarrassment, and they were saying, well, what do you guys, some people say that you're post-punk, some people say that you're punk. Well, what do you, and they said, well, we kind of call ourselves, we think of our music as blister pop. And I think that's actually as apropos a name as you can put on what they did and how they sounded. And this is on My Pal God label, which is, I've never heard anything else by them, although I do know they have a lot more things on there. And this is all very much, none of this is on any of the other stuff. And this is live stuff and oddities and what have you. And it's just great. It's just great. There is rumor. And I asked Bill about it a while ago, and he said, well, that's really in Woody's camp ballpark now. You'd have to ask him, and I don't know Woody at all, so I never have. But there is rumor that there was a recording done in a radio studio of a number of songs. They did a pretty long set. And then they were remastering them. And I can't remember if they were recorded in Nashville or if they were just being mastered. I can't remember now. But that it's supposed to come out as a new album of live Embarrassment. I wish that would come out. This is one of my all-time favorite bands. And that's one reason why I'm talking about Bill here and kind of focusing on him, because he happens to be in two of my all-time favorite bands. There is, that I know of, one other CD that you can buy directly from Bill that was done at the same time as this, that's all live stuff. And I haven't gotten that yet. I'm a poor son of a bitch, and I just, but it's on my list, and I will be getting one. Okay, moving on. Bill moved to Boston, and it's kind of funny. Rob Boston, asked me one day, on my thing about Men in Volts, he said, well, are you from Boston or something? And I'm not. But I wish, I tell you what, if there's any city that I should have been living in the 80s, it's Boston. Because, as far as I'm concerned, first of all, in the 80s, Boston was outdoing every other major metropolitan area in the United States in terms of putting out the great music that was coming out of there and the diversity of the music that was coming out of there. So here we are, another one of my all-time favorite bands. Again, a Boston band. Bill and Woody moved to Boston in 1984-ish. And Woody then became drummer for the band Del Fuegos. And their first three albums, Woody is the drummer on those, Brent Giesman. And those are great albums too, by the way. I didn't drag them over here to show you, but they are great albums, and I've got them. And then he also toured with them a year or two ago when Del Fuego's original lineup had a reunion and did a tour around the country. I did not see that, and I've never seen Del Fuego's live, but I'll tell you what, that was a great band, and that was one of those bands that really had a lot to do with bringing the whole idea of roots rock or almost Americana into the mix with the independent indie music thing. But then there was this band, and this released in 1986 on Homestead Records. Big Dipper's first record, an EP. The title is Boo Boo. I hope you can see this cover really well. I think it's hilarious, and that's why I bought this originally. I bought it because I thought, if you'll see, there's a couple of bears hanging there, a big bear and a little bear, like Yogi and Boo Boo and this guy. I don't know where they got that picture. Sort of a dark humor. And this was the record that I was so crazy about, and that caused me to be introduced and go back and discover the Embarrassment, who I never had a chance to see because I was not around. This is great. This is absolutely great. The song Faith Healer, which if you ever get a chance, go on YouTube, enter Big Dipper Faith Healer. If you don't, if you just put Big Dipper in, you're going to get everything but this band. I'm serious. But if you put Big Dipper Faith Healer, you'll see the original video of this. The sound quality is not great. It's really quiet. But I love watching it, and I'm going to tell you this right now. The first guy on the video who's dancing around like a total nerd, that is Bill, and he still dances around like that. I love this man. We're not real close friends. We're good acquaintances, maybe one might say. But he is a truly an intelligent and talented and very kind man. San Quentin, CA, which is maybe one of the darkest songs they ever did. A song about everything going wrong. What in Sam Hill, Wrong in the Charts, Answers, and Loch Ness Monster, which is a wonderful song too. I wish I could play these things for you, but in the background I am playing some Big Dipper, but not that. What happened was Woody went off with Del Fuegos. Bill was introduced to a guy named Gary Walick, who had been in the original lineup of Peter Prescott's band Volcano Suns. Peter Prescott, of course, being maybe better known as the drummer for Mission of Burma. I love Volcano Suns, and I don't have anything by them on vinyl yet, but they are brilliant. I do have some other stuff by them, though, some CDs and what have you. They started writing songs together, along with Steve Missioner, who had been in the Volcano Suns and had also been in a band in Boston called Dump Truck. Both of those bands are, that's just an example of how incredible. They started writing together. They brought in a relative of Steve's, I think he's a relative of Steve's, by the name of Jeff Oliphant to play drums, and started playing around, gigging around in Boston, and based just on the stir that they were creating at that time. And this is a band that, to hear them live was an utter joyful experience, and to hear their records, it's just, there's such a incredible thing going on with them, and one of them being Bill, who's one of the best rhythm guitar players ever. I don't think there's anybody better than Bill. There may be others as good, but I don't think I put him up against any other rhythm guitarist around. And Gary Walick, the way they intertwine those two, the dual guitar, is just incredible. Based on just the buzz, having heard nothing really by them, Homestead offered them a 3-record deal, which they, of course, were happy to do. The first of those, 1986, was Big Dipper. In 1987, Boo Boo, excuse me. In 1987, then they came out with Heavens. She's Fetching, Man of War, Easter Eve, Humason, Lunar Module, all going out together. Younger Bums, When Men Were Trains, Wet Weekend, and Mr. Woods. I'm going to real quick mention, I don't know who produced these. Does it say? But these were recorded by Lou Giordano and Big Dipper. I recently in the Men in Volt thing mentioned Sean Slade. This is produced by Sean Slade, Paul Coldery, and Big Dipper. Both Sean Slade and Paul Coldery there are connections with Men in Volt. Paul Coldery, I think, also was. I think he might have been in Sex Execs with Sean. At any rate, great album, by most people considered to be their best. Let me also mention real quick, Bill is also a visual artist. That's what he was studying in Boston, and he spent many years, actually, well over probably a couple decades, teaching art, not in public schools. And he has shows around Boston and area, and now in Wichita area, where he's currently living with his new wife. This painting is by Bill, and kind of introduces one of the big themes that reoccurs frequently in Big Dipper's music, is that of alien beings, and UFOs. Another one, of course, like Loch Ness Monster. Those, all that kind of Learning Channel stuff, I guess. Then I have this 12-inch single, Big Dipper, All Going Out Together. I love this image, and I do believe that might have been put out as a. And this is a 3-song EP, although it has at the end of it 2 of the songs, He Is God and Which Would You, what's it called here? Which Would You Rather, are not released, were not released on anything else. But one of, then there's also I think they call it a fruity sound collage that Gary Waylick did, that includes, in it, you hear coming in and out kind of the Japanese girl punk pop band Shona Knife playing a cover of Faith Healer. And I'll talk about that at some other point, but Gary wrote a really good article, essay, truly, about Shona Knife that I keep trying to find. I had it in a fanzine, and now I don't have it anymore. And then we have their 3rd record on Homestead, Craps. This is a gatefold, and I really, really love this album. Some people thought this was weak and kind of blamed the fact that Bill Gaufrier, at the same time that this was being done in '88, that he was also kind of dividing his attention between that and the embarrassment. I don't agree with that at all. I'm not going to say I violently disagree, but I strongly disagree with that. And this has some great songs. Starting Because, Bonnie, Hey Mr. Lincoln, What's the Skinny Man? The Bells of Love, A Song to Be Beautiful, which was a song that was written by, included Michael Kodahi, who I'm not sure where. I know that that's another name that kind of pops up with some other things involving indirectly or directly involved stuff. See, this town was the town to be in at that time. God, I wish I'd been there. I'd probably still be wandering in a daze around there. Well, kind of real quickly read a little bit to introduce and tell you a little bit about the story here. When you think back on it, Big Dipper was a supergroup. It sounds funny for definition. A supergroup lives along the lines of Blind Faith or GTR, but the pre-Dipper pedigree of the band was undeniable, with members having done time in some of the better groups of the early to mid 80s. And that's true. Gary Waylick, Volcano Sons with Steve Mischer, also in Dump Truck, Bill Gaufrier, the legendary, and Jeff Oliphant, and a little bit of everything from, it was just a perfect blend. Is the deal. They were truly, I hate to say, darlings of the indie scene and the college radio crowd, college music crowd, but they really were pretty much. And as is inevitably going to happen in that kind of situation, big labels started sniffing around. They'd fulfilled their contract, and they finally were given an offer from Epic Records for 8 albums, to do 8 albums, and a huge amount of money, just an incredible amount of money, you know, with, of course, the option that Epic could drop them at any time. Well, I do not blame Big Dipper at all. They bit. They took the bait. And they got a big advance of money, probably more than they'd spent on all 3 of the records they'd recorded before. They went down in a big, cool professional studio, blah, 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 blah. And they recorded this, which came out in 1990. This is Big Dipper's one major label album, Slam. You know what? God, I just thought about it. I just realized how ironic that name is. Because here's what kind of happened. Before the album even came out, I remember people who were claiming to be big fans of Big Dipper saying, oh man, they sold out. This is going to suck. That whole hipster thing of, this is my band, I don't want to share them, you can't have them kind of thing. I used to like them until they became popular. Now they bore me. Or, you know, that kind of shit. Very poser kind of thing. And then when it came out, it unfortunately was not their best album. This is, of all their records, probably the weakest, and it's kind of overproduced. And they did a few things that maybe they should have waited and done on a later album, like having horns. And so it didn't sell real well. They also kind of started having problems with Epic right away. Typical radio executive fucks. They had promised, we're going to support you huge and big, and we're going to promote the hell out of this album, and we're going to really support, you're going to do this big tour and stuff. Then they were like, the promotion didn't happen, particularly of the album. The tour they tried to back out on after it had already been booked and everything. Things just went sour really quick with them. They did tour. I did see them when they played in support of this in Kansas City, and they were fucking great. They were always great. God, I saw them 3 or 4 times, and they were always incredible. First time I saw them, they were playing in a tiny little place in Lawrence, Kansas. There wasn't even a riser, and they were just on the checkerboard floor over in a corner. They were like, hi, we're Big Dipper, bam, 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 and it was just like, woohoo, and that's the kind of band they are. And part of that is a reflection, I think, of Bill Gaufrier's personality and maybe the whole band. At any rate, they get back from this tour in September of 1990, I guess it was, or 91, I can't remember. And Steve Michener says, I'm done, splits. He's gone. As soon as they get back, he packs his bag. And he moved out west, where he continues to live. They're still all good friends and everything, but he's never really had that much to do with the music industry since then. I believe he runs a winery or something out there in, I want to say Oregon. I think Oregon. I don't really remember. And part of it is just a little bit of bitterness over this album. I mean, there is some bitterness. And I'm going to say this right now. Steve Michener, your song, Life Inside the Cemetery, on this album is maybe the best song on this album and maybe the best thing you ever wrote. It is an incredible song. And the truth is if you can look past the overproduction, and it's not that bad. It's not like it's slicker. It's not on a brass doorknob. It doesn't sound like Toto, for God's sake. Love Barge is a pretty damn good song. Another Life is excellent. Bony Knees of Nothing, I think, is just a killer song. Picnic. The Monsters of Jazz is pretty. Impossible Things Before Breakfast, Only for Us. Man, great. Father's Day, one of those kind of touching and enigmatic songs that Bill Gaufrier is so good at doing. Life Inside the Cemetery. If there's anything weird on it, it's all the way from Memphis. And that's really, I honestly, I think playing it live Oh, they would have killed it. But it just sort of seemed a little odd. But only a little. You know, what the hell? I have in this thing here, I still have the J card from the cassette that came out, which I bought when the album was released. That cassette made a terrible end. It got dropped into a bottle of Coca-Cola, and you know what? Coca-Cola can really fuck up a cassette. I don't advise doing that. You'll never be able to play it again. Band kind of, they just went back into the studio. Steve had left, and they hooked up with a guy by the name of Tom Brewer, and is that right? Tom Brewer? Yeah, Tom Brewitt. Excuse me. And continued recording. They were, hey, well, let's just work on our next album. Licking our wounds. Let's go to work on the next album. Then that following spring, early in the next year, in '91, Epic said, we're dropping you. They kept right on. They kept the faith, and they kept right on recording, and they couldn't find anybody that was interested. Nobody would touch them with a 10-foot pole. It was almost as though they'd been blackballed or something. I don't know. But they did record for a while, and for a year or so, they kept on. Tom Brewitt left, and they got a guy by the name of John Styklunas to play with them. And then Gary said, you know what, guys, I'm packing it in. It's not going to happen. And he had been given an offer to go to work full-time for National Public Radio, producing a sports show called It's Only a Game. And but Bill and by that time it was Jeff had also left and went on to have a very successful career in finance, but Woody Giesman joined up. So Bill, Woody, and John Styklunas carried on for a while as Saucer. They did make a few recordings, and this is a 6-song CD EP that Bill released in 2011. I have a couple of copies of it, and I'm telling you, it's great stuff. And then but around 2008, Merge Records, on almost a dare from Gary, is kind of the understanding that I have of it, got a hold of, I'm not going to go into the whole story because I can tell I'm already talking as long as I was before, but they got a hold of the masters for the Homestead records, and they put this out with a third CD. There are 2 CDs. The first one has Boo Boo and Heavens on it. The second one has Craps and 8 bonus tracks from that period. And then the third CD, called A Very Loud Array, is the music that Big Dipper recorded after, while they were trying to put together their second major label album that never happened. A real shame. God, what a great band this was. What I've been playing in the background is A Very Loud Array. So the band, there are 5,000 of these. I don't know that any of them are available. It's out of print, and I don't think you can get it from Merge anymore. But you might be able to find it looking around, and I would recommend this very highly. You might. The Big Dipper albums, records, are not that hard to find, and they're not that expensive either, by the way. But they got together. They played a few gigs. I don't remember how many, about 5 at the most, probably, in support of this reissue, the anthology, Big Dipper anthology, which is titled Supercluster. They really had a great time. Now, Steve Missioner did not participate in that, but Tom Brewitt did. And during the time, in the interim, which, had been 20 years by 2008 almost, almost 20 years, Gary Waylick, of course, had his own studio, and he's done a bunch of stuff with people from all over, including one of the guys from Sebadoh and several other people. I would love to hear that stuff. But they started recording together again. They started, and they just took their time. So between 2008 and when this came out in 2012, they recorded an album's worth of material. There's probably more than this. I began to hear a few of these as demos, the ones that Bill had written, particularly Lord Scrumptious and Happy New Year, before the album came out. And I loved them. And I still actually, I'm not sure, but what I don't like Bill's demo version of Lord Scrumptious better than the studio version on the album. Let's just say they're equal. So in 2012, after 22 years of silence, Big Dipper puts out this album. Big Dipper crashes on the Platinum Planet, and it is an absolutely great album. It not only did the band still have it, but it was obvious they were just as good or better than ever. In all seriousness, there's no questioning that 22 years have passed and that these men have grown musically and personally, which is a good thing. Unless you're just utterly, pathologically afflicted with Peter Pan syndrome or something, you sure as hell ought to grow in 22 years, don't you think? So this came out. This is what the pre-order that I ordered from Newberry Comics, and of course is signed by the band. And then I also have 2 copies of it on vinyl. The first 200 were pressed on delicious clear blue, and I have 2 of those. I don't know how many of these have sold, but after that I believe it went to black vinyl. I recommend this a huge amount. Bill, then after all of this brouhaha, Bill met this gal, the story of which is told in the song Hurricane Bill. I am certain that song is about Bill and Carly meeting. I am absolutely certain. If Bill sees this, he'll probably say, "No, you damn fool," because if there's one thing about Bill, it's that his lyrics are always kind of tricksterish. And let me mention a couple other songs on here. Sarah and Monica will cast a spell on you. When I wrote a review for this, I first started trying to actually analyze the song and the lyrics, and then I thought, you know what, this is some dangerous territory. I cannot tell for sure what this is about, but I'll tell you what, it is gorgeous. That song is penned by Gary Waylick, and is a good example of how the band grew musically. Also, Pitbull Cruiser Blue and New Machine, which were written, Gofri Waylick is the credits on Pitbull Cruiser Blue, and New Machine is Waylick Gofri credited. Show that they can sound just as much part of 2011 on those, and then there are just things that you just aren't going to hear. There are 2 songs that Jeff Oliphant wrote, and I don't think he'd ever written a song before for Big Dipper. And one of them in particular, Princess Warrior, I really like a lot. It's a song about Jeff's wife and her battle and eventual victory with cancer. And it's one of those songs that maybe you got to live through it. I've heard a few young hipster critics kind of slag that song. I think it's one of those things that, well, you're 22, screw you, what do you know? But Jeff turns out to be a good songwriter. Anyway, Bill, somewhere along the line, met a great gal named Carly Dean. I do believe Bill had been married before. In fact, I'm quite certain he had. But he met Carly Dean. They fell in love, and eventually they now are married and living in Wichita. But they had done some things, and Bill and Carly had come back, and I'd seen them play. And they started making recordings together. And I have 3 copies of this. These 2 are the first 2, what they first were doing. It's got some great songs on it. And Carly is a full partner in writing these songs and performing them with Bill. And that these were called home recordings. And this one then is called Home. Recordings got dropped, and I absolutely love this photograph. Singing as they're driving in the car. And it is on Homebound Records. If you're familiar with Homestead label and their logo, you'll get the joke on that. And I do believe, I know that they're retooling these now with a full band. They've been playing and performing a lot with a band from Wichita called the Tom Page Trio. They're very, very good, and I do have a couple of CDs by them as well. I really look forward to that full band version coming out. And I think it may, as I said, they are now married, and I'm not sure that these are available anymore, although you can go to Bandcamp and get the songs individually, I believe. Bill, now living in Wichita with his wife Carly, playing around town a bit, doing some shows. I'm not sure what all they're doing down there. I've been down to Wichita to see him, been up and seen them in Kansas City, saw Bill in Lawrence, all of those things within the past 3 or 4 years, and would certainly like to see them again. Love them very much. Think they're just they're a wonderful couple, and what they're doing now kind of reminds me a bit of Reckless Eric and Amy Rigby and their shows that they do together, which are definitely rock shows and definitely punk thing that's going on. And there's a punk thing going on with this too. But not that tyranny of punk style that poser kids who are in their 20s or early 30s, and they think, well, punk, this is our music. I'm like, no, it's not. It's your dad's music. Maybe even your grandpa's if you're young enough. 1976. Come on, give me a break. Shut up. Great band, and I'll tell you what. Speaking of punk, you ain't never heard anybody cover "I Want to Be Sedated" till you've heard Bill and Carly Gaufrier cover it with the Tom Page Trio and Dude Stewart playing along with them on violin. And it's the coolest thing. That's how they ended the 2 shows that I've seen them play together. Although I don't think Dude Stewart was there on the second one. And I remember thinking while I was watching them play there at the Donut Hole in Wichita, I was like, this is so much more punk than 90% of what passes for punk today. These guys are great. I love them. Big Dipper, check them out. Their vinyl is pretty reasonable. Even the singles, which I'm still don't have. I'm still working on that. The Embarrassment, pricier, but if you want to hear some really great early 80s, turn of the decade post-punk, punk, blister pop, you can't do better. You're not going to do better than The Embarrassment. And they are themselves. They may remind you here and there of other bands, of course, because they listen to stuff that wasn't on the radio here, but they weren't in a vacuum. But they, nevertheless, they were able to put all of that together and create their own unique sound. And the same, I think, is true of Big Dipper. That's a unique band. Nobody else really sounds like Big Dipper to me. And both of them, among definitely my all-time favorite bands, and one from my all-time favorite music town, Boston.